Welcome back to WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. These are the fun segments. You know, when Bill Cole came to me a couple years ago and said, I don't want you to stick to sports anymore. I want you to talk to other people about other things. And I thought, well, charities, communities, church groups, people in need, people like my wife, and there goes my hero who need things. And this whole thing has evolved into a fun little journey for me. So as much as the Ravens are in season and the new website is there, and for my old sports fans at WNST and Baltimore Positive all merged into one place, I have gone into the Wayback Machine to find the people who are responsible for me. The people who educated me along life's journey. You can find my first grade teacher, the lovely Miss Janda, out at Baltimore Positive, and I'm finding various people. This one is going to be amongst my favorites, if not my favorite, because I loved having Julie Simon as my college professor back in 1990, 91, 92. She had worked in the real world of television prior to teaching me. I was at the newspaper at the time. And other than a random once or twice on LinkedIn, I have not really linked in or been in a room with Julie Simon since 91, maybe into 92. Julie, welcome in. I wish we could go to Jay's for a beer, as grown-ups do. But I loved having you as my teacher, and I'm glad I tracked you down, and I'm glad that you have submitted to 25 to 30 minutes of adult conversation about education, and hopefully Marshall McLuhan will be involved at some point.
Jay's is closed, so that wouldn't work out real well. But it's nice to see you, Nestor. I have remembered you over the years also. You are unforgettable.
Well, I think I had you for more than one course because I enjoyed the first course I had, but you were a professional. Like, you had worked at real television stations and real places when TV, before the internet, really was happening. So we're talking 1990, 91, and I was at the paper, right? What's that?
I guess 30 years ago. It's a long time.
Well, you were new to teaching at the time. You were a very young professor.
Well, and you brand new. I came right out of television and got the job at UB, and I have been there since. I've been there 31 years now, so it's been a really long time.
So you barely knew what you were doing when you had me as a student. Is that what you're saying?
I totally didn't know what I was doing. I'm not sure I know what I'm doing now,
What do you do
now? So this is all like being a first-year teacher.
Well, other than me having you a couple of times, I believe, and you were, I just on a personal level, I was a very young parent, and in 1991, I had a 7-year-old son. I took some night classes with you, as I remember it. I brought my son to class once or twice, who was a pretty good lad in the corner, and you were incredibly gracious. And, I think that's part of the UB experience, because I had Dr. Sandra Curtinitis on. We've had her on a few times from CCBC, and I talk about going to Dundalk Community College and the challenges I had being a parent at 16 and being a college student in night classes and how people need to get their education in. And UB was eye-opening for that because I had nighttime courses, daytime courses. There were grown-ups there. There were people on law tracks there. It was a fascinating place. You could go get a beer and I could call you Julie, right? It was like a grown-up place. And I really appreciated that. I really did.
It's still that. It's still that. UB has, as long as I've been there, for the 3 decades I've been there, has really catered to the adult learner. We're very interested in, we do have freshmen and sophomores now, but we're very interested in the returning student. It's a place where you can go as a 28-year-old and not feel like, oh God, I'm in here with 18-year-olds and they're in a completely different life place. You are more apt to find people who look and are in your age group at UB than you might at some of the other campuses.
Well, it had grown at that point, and literally our classroom was above Jay's. All that was getting built out. I want to hear your journey because I don't know it, and that's one of the reasons I'm having you on. Is I found you because you decided you wanted to be a teacher, a professor, instead of what all I wanted to do was be involved in rolling the sleeves up and have a job and work at the paper. And I was working at the paper then. And I wanted to be in TV. I wanted to be John Buren, and so that's the track I was on, and the radio thing I kind of fell into, but you sort of trained me for that. I mean, I remember doing video with you. I remember doing audio with you. I remember making, with my son, with his reading teacher, a video about how children learn. That was a project that I did for you when we had like high 8 tapes and trackers and mixing tapes and stuff. So I'm very equipped for like YouTube. You know, you really trained me to be able to do Zoom and YouTube and host a multimedia company the way I have.
Well, I appreciate that. That's a really nice thing to say, Nestor. But that's what we're trying to do with all our students, is prepare them for real life situations. We've had many students who come back and say, you know, what we learned at UB is what we are doing in the field. So that makes me feel good. But what makes me really feel good is students who come back and say, I used what I learned at UB. I used what you taught me. And that as now an old time teacher, makes me very happy. I like to hear that.
You made me do a marketing project where I did this fish and this girl in a fishbowl, but it was like a panel that was like an ad panel. And all I've done to feed my family for the last 29 and a half years of doing radio is sell El Guapo a sponsorship and go and eat their delicious quesadillas. I drank their margaritas last night. And market things. Well, and even marketing things like having a logo for El Guapo. And I actually met this guy the other night, Bruzzy, good guy, Catonsville in the 21228. But also like my work and in laying out this new project I have at Baltimore Positive, where I'm taking all my newspaper skills and layout skills and artsy skills, but also the point where you gave me a video camera and said, yeah, I know you're a writer, Ness, but, you know, one day you may have to hold a camera. And if you want to work in television, you may have to learn how to edit this stuff. Like all of that multimedia stuff that even 30 years later that the internet, and I guess this is where the theory of like teaching me stuff like McLuhan, where all this stuff comes from, that I'm fascinated with how far it's gone since the last time I talked to you as to the way that the medium is the message, right? So I sort of taken that with me for 30 years, and I guess that's why you're here today, even though you're not a McLuhan expert.
No, I'm not, but media has come around. You have to look at media and what's happened over the last 30 years is we were just starting to put video into things. 30 years ago, video was VHS. And I remember coming out of television and looking at the equipment that we had at the university and laughing in my job interview, like, you gotta be kidding. But what I learned then and what I still think about now, because now I'm teaching a lot with this, with the cell phone, because the message is still what's important. You know, the message with VHS and the message with cell phones and the internet, and now we're all living and teaching and working on Zoom, it's the same message. You know, you think about it. We've been at this for a long time and we're basically doing the same thing. It's just the toys have changed.
Yeah, and the selectivity of it all, right? Like the fact that we go into our red castle or our blue castle politically, or the city we live in, or the place we are, or the neighborhood, or the things that if I'm thinking about growing a plant, Google seems to know it and deliver me an ad about, where to find plant food. Literally. And just now that I've said that out loud, I'm sure it'll happen. But the big brother part of all of this in sort of figuring out what we like, that's been the danger of America to me in a marketing way, in a political way, has been whatever silo we go into. We seek out what we want, and that's where we stay now. And that's sort of a weird place to be, because all of us live in our phone, but we live in the places that are comfortable in our phone.
I think that's true. Honestly, I think you're very right in that. I was just talking to my husband this morning about, siloed political parties and how our nation right now seems so divided. And his point was, we've been divided for a long time. It's just coming to the surface now. And we're siloed everywhere. We're siloed now in our homes. I mean, I haven't been out of my house other than to go to the grocery store in 6 months. You know, we go very few places right now. So we're living in this world, between the screen and ourselves. You know, living here in my living room, I'm teaching, I'm communicating with my friends and family, I'm talking to you.
And I'm
All
appreciative.
all these things are happening from this chair right now. And
I
that's
hope you have a comfortable chair.
yeah, I got one because the back was going. But all of that is all centered right now in this box. And I find that really sort of scary and interesting at the same time.
Yeah, it's sort of Mike TV from Willy Wonka. It's got a little bit of that like Truman Show, thing. Certainly every single thing I've seen coming out of Pennsylvania Avenue feels like Wag the Dog. I mean, it all has some sort of weird being played out in sliver or something like that on a television screen. And I guess from education, and this is where, I've talked to some teachers who gave it up a long time ago. I did not know my first grade teacher, Miss Jonda, actually didn't teach kids very long at all. She wound up teaching teachers forever. And she was a coach for teachers, And Don Moeller was my high school guidance counselor, which is how all of this began. For you, you were like on the television side. Give everybody your background in the 80s on the trajectory you might have been on to go work at ESPN or the network or whatever. Because I know those people now too, Jewel. It's 30 years later. I know tons of people who stayed in television or newspaper or radio, and all of it became fractured, right? Like every buddy of mine in the newspaper business has had to figure out something else to do with their life in the same way that I think beyond sports, I've had to do that. 30 years of professoring, I can't imagine how much what you've been teaching has changed, right?
It's totally changed. I mean, I basically spent the 80s in television news. And that was changing just as cable came in. As it became, I remember CNN starting. CNN, we used to call the Chicken Noodle News Network. And now it's become this great powerhouse of an organization. I mean, it was silly when it first started. It was god awful.
It was Ted's network.
Yeah, and I had a friend from college who went down there because they were hiring people at $8,000 a year right out of school, and her desk was sitting on top of a filing cabinet with a typewriter. That was her office. Is literally she just climbed up on top of the filing cabinet and sat there and wrote news stories on a typewriter, not a computer, a typewriter.
They didn't even give her a little Radio Shack thing, right?
No, it's crazy. And, I started working TV. We had our manual typewriters and we're writing news stories. And I left in 89 and we had gone, I was working for ABC at the time.
Where did you work? Like Denver, Raleigh?
I worked in Denver. I started in Denver. I went to Cleveland. I worked in Philly. I worked at a startup TV station in Charlotte, North Carolina. I worked a bunch of places, but ultimately.
Well, you were on a track. I mean, where are you from originally?
Track, but it wasn't in my heart. And I realized that after a while. And what I had really wanted to do was to teach. And I kind of poo-pooed that when I got into television. I fell into television. And I always thought I would end up teaching, and ultimately that's what I ended up doing, and I'm much more happy for it.
Where are you from?
Denver.
So you grew up in Denver and you settled in Baltimore. That's always an interesting thing. I mean, we do Baltimore Positive here. I'm always freaked out by somebody who says, yeah, I grew up in San Diego, but I settled in Baltimore, like my friend Jerry Gutierrez,
I love Baltimore. Baltimore's a great town.
Give me what made you be attractive in Baltimore attractive to you to make a life here. I mean, there's nothing more Baltimore Positive than to find someone your age that I've spent my whole life in Baltimore and I'm from someplace else. I'm from the cocoon of Dundalk, right? Like the Archie Bunkers Dundalk of the 70s, right? So like everybody I know still lives 20 minutes away from where they grew up because, Ocean City was a day trip and Disney World's a place you went once, literally.
Yeah. I ultimately came here because I had family here. And in television, I moved every couple of years and I was tired of going to new places where I knew nobody. And TV, radio, as you know, is a 24/7 job. And so you don't really make friends outside of your workplace. And it was very inconducive to ultimately having a family. And that was something that I wanted. So I got the job offer in Baltimore, and I had family here in Baltimore and in DC, and I had a really good friend that was living here at the time. And I thought, if I'm going to go somewhere, let me go somewhere where I have people that know me, and I don't have to start over. So that's why I came to Baltimore. But I've stayed because I've really begun to love this city. I really like Baltimore. I mean, it's a fun town.
This brings a smile to my face, as you well know.
It's a great place. And I hear people, diss Baltimore, and I'm like, have you been here? This is a great city. It's full of interesting, artistic people who want to do good, who want to improve our city and our life, and yeah, it has problems, but so does Denver, and so does San Diego, and so does Chicago, and so does every major metropolitan area. You're not going to find one that doesn't have issues.
Julie Simon is my guest. Are you a doctor yet, or do I have to?
I've never been a doctor.
I just want to make sure. I mean,
no.
because I get tired. See, Mueller gets like we had Nancy Pelosi on last week, and we had to make sure we called her Madam Speaker because we slipped and called her name. It's all about title. Professor Julie Simon, who was my professor on Media Matters and Marshall McLuhan and all sorts of video and audio stuff that I use today at Baltimore Positive as part of my Teacher Appreciation Month. The International Teacher Appreciation Day is like October 4th. My birthday's October 14th. So thank you very much. And in the month, I thought, I'm going to reach to every teacher to honor Don for what he's done, but also just some of my, the experience. I can't begin to tell you how many times I think about you or the class or something I learned or something there. I drive by it. I don't like seeing Angelos' name on the wall. You're the only person from UB I'll ever have on. They're always trying to get me to raise money and stuff, and I won't do it because I have my press pass taken away, which you can understand. But that's another story. But I loved my UB experience.
Mister. Give us the money. We need the money.
I'll give you
Help us educate students who are like you, who came back and wanted to learn.
Mr. Angelos tried to end my career and end my livelihood so I couldn't feed my family. So yes, I'm not
College
really.
Arts and Sciences.
It says so on the wall. But nonetheless, I had a great experience there, and I would highly recommend it for anyone that's at that place. Give everybody an overview of where you are now and what you do on a daily basis, because I really don't know. I mean, I haven't, for 30 years, I would have loved to have had a coffee with you. I'm glad we could do it publicly and at least talk some McLuhan here, Jewel,
You got to talk McLuhan. I keep telling you I'm not a theorist. Where am I? Here. I'm here in my living room. I don't go anywhere. It's COVID time, don't you?
But what do you teach these days to people?
I teach video production. I teach photography. I still teach a class called Communication Technologies. I'm teaching a documentary film class next semester. I'm doing a film semiotics class this semester. I teach things that have to do with lens-based media, cameras.
Like this?
Yeah, sort of.
Nice.
We're learning, what can you do with Zoom? I've been playing with ideas like that, as many of my colleagues across the country have, is how do you teach media when you are doing this, when you are Zooming? So that's
I'll give you first thing that I know doing this every day is people take audio for granted, and I don't. And I hate when people give me bad audio. I hate when it sounds terrible on the radio because it's what I do and it's what I've done. And the further your mouth is from the mic, I'll give you an example. My wife's been doing yoga every morning in the office, and my office tends to be big space. If the person doing yoga doesn't have a professional mic and it sounds like they're in a hallway teaching me yoga and I'm a yoga guy, I can't hang with that. And I think a lot of people have a long way to go in presenting audio, that if I were teaching a class, the audio portion of whatever you're presenting, because if it sounds like Charlie Brown, no one's going to listen. Literally.
No, I agree with you, which is why I've got, a microphone. I have lights. So when I'm teaching, my head is at the height of the camera. I mean, these are just simple little things about appearing on Zoom, but they're true of teaching video production. If my students go out and do an interview, I want it lit because that looks god-awful.
What about green screens? Where are you? It wouldn't work with my El Guapo shirt here, the new one. My wife's like, take the green shirt.
Yeah, it probably would.
Well, you know, everybody comes on now. Like Greg Scher came on last week, and he had Memorial Stadium behind him. And Billy Cole comes on every week, and it looks like he's sitting on the roof of his roofing company. So, you know, I get all that. But, you know, you worked in Cleveland. I mean, you can appreciate the leg lamp, right, Jewel?
Mm-hmm.
What do you got going? Oh, see that? Now I feel like I'm back at UB. Why would you leave that one on for me? That's the perfect green screen.
Because it burns. You talk about good production. This is why I don't leave it on. It's a bad key.
I'm still being taught by you, Julie Simon, which is why I love you. Julie Simon here from UB. I'll wrap on this. Like for teaching anyone, and I guess like you teach adults, right?
Yeah.
I was with Don Moeller. His daughter Jen is a high school or a elementary school principal at Hillcrest. I've had my first grade teacher on this week. I'll have others on. Teaching children and being a parent with children now, and I guess the resiliency of this era of child. But I would even think for a distracted 28-year-old you're trying to teach on Zoom, you're paying a lot to be in college, you're being compensated to teach these people. But boy, there is a distraction level about all of life right now when it comes to even right now. Somebody, man, my next guest, Dave Spadero, wants to talk Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm distracted while I'm on a camera with you because that's the way the world is, right?
It is. It is. I mean, I think we've become very isolated in the sense of we're all sort of doing this from our living rooms over cameras. But I think that was happening before COVID too. I think that, you know, as you said, you know, the phone is, I mean, I see students like this, you know, all the time. And I've gotten to the point where I've banned phones in the classroom, and now I've banned them on Zoom. You know, I don't want to see this. I want to see you, and I want to talk to you. And that's what I miss about being in the classroom. I mean, we'll get back there, hopefully sooner rather than later, but we'll get back into the classroom. And I think there's a lot to be said about person-to-person contact in a classroom. You know, my daughter's 24 years old. She's a nursing student right now, upstairs going to Zoom nursing school, and
that's not as much fun as Jay's was before your class.
She's freaking out because she doesn't think she's being prepared to be a frontline worker because they're trying to keep them safe by not bringing them into the hospital this semester. You know, and it's a real dilemma. You know, you have a 6-year-old sitting in front of a screen. I mean, that's the last thing I would want is a 6-year-old sitting in front of a screen. They need to be with their peers, but they also need to be kept healthy and safe. And I'm glad I don't have to deal with that right now. And I feel for all my students who are dealing with that. I see many a baby sitting on a lap in a Zoom session or a toddler, and they just sit there. And I keep my puppets handy.
Oh, nice. Look at this. I'm getting a show.
I entertain the kids half the time because we've got to engage. And if I can get attention by playing with puppets on a screen to entertain the 5 children that are in Zoom windows with their parents, I'm going to do that. You know, whatever I can. That's why when your son was a 4 or 5-year-old, 6-year-old.
It was like that.
You know, I have had many a kid in a classroom, including my own, who would sit, you know, in the corner, you know, with the
well, that made you like
DVD
super
player.
badass cool to me in 1991 when I was in your class, and I said I can spend the evening with my son and bring him to class. It was it wasn't heavy. It was more the cut and paste kind of marketing stuff we were doing. I remember it vividly, and it opened up his eyes to what college was. You know, that he went to elementary school. He was in first grade, I think, at the time. That he would see what a college looked like at night made him want to go to college, even though he didn't go to college. But that's fine.
Did he go to college?
No, he learned everything he knows on the internet. He's smarter than me. You know, he's got longer hair too. You know, but
you know, college isn't for everybody. But you know, we try to get to no, it isn't.
It isn't.
But we try to get to the people that want that. So if you need your 5-year-old, you know, sitting next to you while you're in a class and that's working for you, then that's fine. And I think UB's been always very tolerant of people's children. And you know, we're doing it on screens now. We've got babies. I've got cats. I mean, we've got everybody coming into class now, and we're doing what we have to do because, you know, our students deserve an education. And if we have to do it this way, we're going to do it this way. And when we can get back to the classroom, we'll get back to the classroom.
Well, I'm glad that you've brought me into your classroom, at least here briefly. Professor Julie Simon.
The next year, so.
If I want any more, you got to sign up for the photography class with my wife.
I know. I'm teaching it now.
We become what we behold. We shape our tools, and thereafter, our tools shape us. The global village. The medium is the message. So for me, you know, I have studied more McLuhan. I've been trying to really grasp it, but that is the thing I think, and I probably think of you so often, and you are associated with McLuhan, even though you're going to turn me on to some other professor that knows more about McLuhan that I'm going to try to have on. But when I see young people into phones, and I guess when I really first saw it, I was in Japan in 2007, and that's the first time I saw phones that actually like worked as televisions, you know, like where we weren't texting or using it as a phone. And I saw it and I'm like, wow, what would McLuhan think of all of this, right? Like what would our parents think of all of this? And now the plague and the education part of this. And if there was a plague in 1990, you would not have been able to educate me this way, right? Like literally.
No, and I've thought of that. You know, I have thought that, and UB's put a lot of money and attention into technology, as most universities have at this point. But
better than the old VCRs.
You know, I've thought about this. Where would we be if this was 1990? Because we didn't have the internet. I mean, what we're going to teach correspondence courses. I mean, I've thought about it, and I think it would be nearly impossible. The reason that we can do this now is the technology. That is the only reason that we can pull this off. People are meeting their doctors in telemedicine appointments. We're having Zoom cocktail parties. My cousin had a Zoom birthday party, you know, where
I've had a couple of Zoom weddings. I've done a few of those.
Zoom, yep. People are getting married on Zoom and on Facebook, and life is going on. Life is going on, but it's only going on, and we are only communicating with each other because of this technology. So that to me is extremely interesting as somebody who has studied technology and taught communication technology for so long, as things have really changed. I teach a course called Comtech, or Communication Technology. And when I started teaching that course, we were talking about linotype machines in print. And we hadn't had a computer lab yet. And we were just starting to put in that first computer lab, and the Mac, you know, made it possible to set type. And we were doing these machines that spit out columns of type and in X-Acto knives and hot wax. I mean, that's what
it changed local newspapers immensely during that period of time in the 80s.
It changed TV too. I mean, we're getting our news now on a 24/7 basis. And when I was in television and the newsrooms finally became computerized, we would get the feeds from AP and UPI, and we could sit there and read them all the time, and we didn't have to sit there and what we called rip the wire, which was really these big loud machines that spit out reams and reams of news as it was happening. Now if I want to read the news, you know, I pull out my phone, I hit my news apps, and
share it with everybody in your world.
Yes, and share it with anybody in my world, and get on Twitter and start tweeting about it, or not. But, you know, sharing ideas. I mean, we are so much more educated now than I think we were 30 years ago. I think we know more. I think we know more about a lot of different things. I don't know if we're any smarter, but we know more.
Well, what to do with it? Now, what to do with it? What to do with that degree I have from UB? I mean, I've made a life. I turned 52 this week. I just wanted to say thank you for your time and your generosity of coming on and continuing education with Professor Julie Simon. How's that? Is that good?
It's nice to see you, Nestor, and thank you for help. You know, even though you're not supporting UB because of Angelos, I thank you personally for supporting some of our graduate students who you graciously gave your time and energy to, and help them. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that. A young man had a sports project he wanted me to help him with last semester, and yeah, I'm always up for. The answer's usually yes. It's just we got to find the time is what we need to do. I'm glad you made the time, Julie. I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
We'll see you, Nestor.
I think of you more than you know every time somebody's staring into one of these crazy things. I'm telling you.
All right. Well, I'm glad that I had an effect on you.
You did. A profound, positive effect. Professor Julie Simon, she's still at UB. Same as it ever was. Even the Jays is gone. The best
Jays is gone.
Life.
But we have a lot of good new restaurants in the area, so.
I can dine around the world in 3 blocks around UB, and go to Greek Church up the street, which is great. You can find all of the work I'm doing and these great conversations I'm having. Teacher Appreciation Month. It might even extend into November. Depends on who wins the election. You can find all of my work there at BaltimorePositive.com. Merging WNST.net, AM 1570. Towson, Baltimore with the new thing. We are Baltimore Positive.